Good evening. Thank you again for coming on such a wonderfully beautiful spring day. We haven't had too many of them yet, so it still feels a little bit like a gift, which it is. I'm Erica Kubik from the World Affairs Council of Western Michigan. Welcome to our second event in this series on refugees. Tonight we'll be focusing on the impact that refugees have had on the state of Michigan. Again, thank you for coming tonight. If you're not yet a member of the World Affairs Council, please sign up for free email membership at the information table later tonight, or sign up through our website, worldmichigan.org. Then you'll receive notice of our upcoming events. The West Michigan Refugee Education and Cultural Center also has an information table that you can check out with information on how to become involved with the refugee resettlement process in Western Michigan. And there was a really great local programming from last week that is available on the Kent District Library YouTube channel or on the World Affairs Council website if you'd like to check that out. They did a great job. Thanks also to the Kent District Library for partnering with our organization, and thanks to the staff at the Kentwood branch of this library for providing such a lovely venue and for hosting a live stream and recording of the event for this series. Special thanks go to branch manager Cheryl Kamenga and our tech gurus, Jared Olson and Andrea Mantakunas. All right, great. Our organizations are pleased to provide this series of programming meant to engage and inform on a controversial topic. Like the week before, prior to our live presentation, we'll be showing a short video published by the Department of Homeland Security that outlines the process that potential refugees must go through to resettle in the United States. This is meant to give you some basic information about resettlement and clear up any misinformation about the security measures that refugees must face. So we'll begin that and continue on after.
This is the Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson. Since the Syrian civil war began, more than 4 million people have fled that country, leaving their entire lives behind them. And the stories we've heard have been heartbreaking. Remember the tragic stories of children who drowned attempting to reach Europe with their families. That's why, once it was concluded that we can do it safely and responsibly, the President announced a plan to resettle at least 10,000 Syrian refugees in the United States within the next year. In the days since the Paris attack, many have tried to argue that accepting Syrian refugees, who, by the way, are mostly women, children, and families, means that we'd make America a more dangerous place. This ignores the reality that anyone who seeks and is approved for refugee status in the United States must first go through a rigorous security screening process. So let's walk through that process and what it looks like for a potential refugee. Meet Rima. Rima and her children have lost their home in Syria. They've made the dangerous journey out of the country, and now Rima is seeking refugee status in a place where she can keep her children safe. First, Rima must apply for refugee status through the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. This is the international organization in charge of protecting and assisting refugees. For Rima to be considered a refugee, she must show that she's been driven from her home due to a, quote, well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion, end quote. If Rima meets the above conditions, she may be referred for resettlement in a country such as the United States. But before she can enter the United States as a refugee, Rima must then undergo a security screening process that is more thorough than any other for people entering this country. She'll have a deep background check. Her biographic and biometric information will be cross-checked against law enforcement and intelligence databases. Rima will also have to pass an in-depth interview, including an interview with a specially trained DHS officer to determine her eligibility. If found eligible, she then receives a medical evaluation. From start to finish, this process includes the involvement of the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, and the Department of Defense. All refugees, including Syrians, go through these security screening measures, and Syrians receive an enhanced review during this process. Over 23,000 Syrian refugee applicants have been referred to us by the UNHCR. Only about 2,000 have been admitted. Throughout history, we've seen that America has become a better nation by welcoming refugees in times of crisis. So many refugees and their children have gone on to make great contributions to our American society. Albert Einstein and Elie Wiesel, two Jews displaced by Nazi Germany, went on to become great Americans. We've seen great athletes such as Nadia Comaneci and Luol Deng flee communism and the Sudanese Civil War, respectively. Taking in refugees at a time of crisis is simply the right thing to do. We can and we will continue to ensure our own security while doing our share to welcome men, women, and children who are refugees fleeing violence. This is the United States of America. We can, we must, and we will do both these things.
Thank you for watching that short video. I hope it provides a lot of thoughtful discussion, either tonight or in continuing conversations. Now let me introduce our topic and speaker for this evening, someone who will also be giving you lots of things to think about and discuss as we move forward. Mr. Bing Goei is the director for the State of Michigan's Office for New Americans. He's also a longtime resident of Grand Rapids and good friend of the World Affairs Council. It was great seeing him mingling with the audience earlier this evening. Tonight he'll bring a blend of personal experience as well as personal stories from others and his professional expertise as director for the Office for New Americans. And he'll discuss how newcomers benefit the state of Michigan. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Bing Goei.
Thank you, Well, good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you, and I am so happy to see so many of you. I thought most of you would be golfing or something tonight, you know? I mean, that's probably what I would be doing, too, so. My name is Bing Goei, and what I'm going to talk about is about me, because I'm also an immigrant. I'm also a refugee. In 1954, my parents fled Indonesia as political refugees when President Sukarno became a very communist, influenced president. And so my father, who was an educator at that time, was being told what to teach. And he felt that that was very dangerous for his children because, you know, that in his mind, that his children will not be able to do and become the best of what they are able to do. So we fled Indonesia. We had, as you may know, Indonesia was a Dutch colony for hundreds of years. And our intent was, my family's intent was to leave Indonesia and then end up in Suriname, which was another Dutch colony in northern part of South America. But before we could do that, we had to go to the Netherlands to wait for a ship to take us from the Netherlands to Suriname. While we were waiting for a ship to take us there, my father, who, again, because of his schooling in Indonesia, in mostly Dutch run schools, knew some people in the Netherlands, and he was offered a teaching position in the Netherlands and accepted that position. So we ended up staying in the Netherlands for about 5.5 years. So for all of you who can speak Dutch, ik kan een klein beetje Hollands spreken. So anyways, okay, that's not speaking in tongues, but it's just, you know, so Dutch was really a language that I also was able to learn as a child. But it wasn't until 1960, 50s, late 59s, in which I think the Dutch government asked the United States government, Queen Juliana asked President Eisenhower for opening up immigration quotas for political refugees from Indonesia, because there was thousands and thousands and thousands of Indonesian political refugees coming to the Netherlands to flee Indonesia. And as you know, in the Netherlands, it's a very small country, probably the size of a little bit smaller than Rhode Island, and all of a sudden there was like 13 million people there. So we were fortunate enough to have been going through the vetting process and allowed to come to the United States. And we were under the sponsorship of Fuller Avenue Christian Reformed Church on the southeast side of Grand Rapids. And when we arrived in Grand Rapids, this is our proof that we arrived here. This is the front page of the Grand Rapids Press, dated January 9, 1960. And here is the picture of our family arriving in the United States, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And the first cross-cultural experience I had was we were met by representatives from the Fuller Avenue Christian Reformed Church, and for those of you who know, the Christian Reformed Church is a predominantly Dutch church. We were met by people with last names like De Vos and Huizingas, except that the fun part of that was we got off the train and we were speaking Dutch and they couldn't. So here's a Chinese family coming off the train speaking Dutch, and they couldn't. But my parents were fluent in English, or my father was fluent in English, so we got away with that. But it is an interesting story in the sense that as I took this position, and when pointed to this position for the director of the Michigan Office for the New American, it also reminded me of my own experiences. And although my experiences are certainly nowhere near the difficulties and the challenges that current refugees and immigrants are experiencing here in the United States. And part of it is what you saw on the video, which I appreciated the World Affairs Council to show that first. Part of what needs to happen today is for us to receive information that are factual. Not information that you hear on sound bites on TV or from political candidates, because unfortunately that information is not factual information. Because you see, as we all recognize, unless you are an indigenous Native American person, we're all immigrants in some ways. Some came here voluntarily, some came here involuntarily, but we all came from other parts of the world. And so it's important for us to realize that as we hear these kinds of, or we have these kinds of conversations, that we have the correct information about refugees and immigration and immigrants. So let me try to kind of help you understand that there are immigrants and refugees are two different categories. Although we kind of lump them together, they are really two different categories. The refugee situation that we're talking about in today's times is that there is a real small cap on how many refugees can come into this country. In this country, until President Obama increased it by 10,000, the cap was around 70 to 75,000. And then, so on an annual basis, that number is really not large for a country that's over 300 million people. The immigrants, under the immigration process with the visas and those kinds of things, there are probably close to 700-some thousand that are allowed every year. And the predominant number of visas that are allowed under this immigration program is what they call the family reunification visa, which allows people who are here to bring to the United States immediate family members who are still in their home country. And the other big part of that is what they call the talent visas, which is to bring in people who are from different parts of the world who could meet the talent needs that the United States needs, the United States has to grow its economy. So what I want to do tonight is to just kind of share with you some information about what maybe you have not heard before, and maybe you have not known before, because we don't talk about this in the media, or we don't talk about this in in our discussion. So I want to talk about the wide range of economic benefits. And when I say that is because I want us to know that the language that we've heard, the conversations that we've heard about immigrants or refugees being a deterrent or detriment to our society is really not true. Because you see, the contributions they make really allows each one of us who've lived in this country for a long period of time to be able to to enrich our own quality of life. And in reality, these immigrants and refugees, with their talents that they bring to our country and to our state, really enhances your opportunity to even increase your wages, in spite of what you're hearing. So let me give you an example of that. So one of the things that, that's being discussed is that, the immigrants and these refugees are all taking away these jobs and things like that. So here's one that I think we're somewhat familiar with. In the agricultural economy in the state of Michigan, we are an over $100 billion economy in the state of Michigan. We are a growing agricultural economy, but right now I will tell you that that is in danger because we don't have enough workers to harvest the crops. And so there is an ongoing conversation about how do we get the workers to harvest the crops. Because you see, we also know by data is that for every worker that comes and harvests the crops, they are able to generate 2 to 3 jobs for Americans. Now that may not make sense to you, except to say this. Once they harvest the crop, the processing, most of those jobs are going to US citizens. The transportation of drivers that are needed to transport these products are going to US citizens. And most of the jobs that are being taken by, for stocking grocery stores are done by US citizens. So you see the importance of having enough of those types of skilled, and I will tell you, it is skilled labor. It is not unskilled labor. Now I haven't done this, but I know from people who have done this, and from what I've heard from growers and those who are in that agricultural economy are saying to me, I don't want to hire anybody that does not know how to pick these crops. So it is skilled labor. So whenever you hear someone kind of, make it like, oh, those are just, unskilled laborers and unskilled workers, I want to tell you, it takes a lot of skills. And so, to just give you an example, so let me just give you some other statistics about the benefits, the economic benefits, and what it could mean to us economically if we don't address this issue, and if we don't begin to look at that this demographic as being a tremendous asset to us as a state and as a nation. So sometimes we don't think about immigrants and refugees in this way. So let me tell you what I think immigrants and refugees are. Immigrants and refugees are employers. They are workers, they are consumers, and most importantly, they are taxpayers. I will give you some statistics. For those of you who are in my age category, they help out Social Security. Because they contribute to our Social Security. They contribute to our Medicare. And I will tell you some numbers that will probably be staggering to you about how much they contribute to those, to those systems for us. In Michigan, in the period of 2006 and 2010, immigrant business owners generated, listen to this number, generated $1.8 billion in net profits. And guess what? They're spending it right here in the state of Michigan. And because they're spending it right here in the state of Michigan, every one of us, whether we are recent immigrants or longtime residents of the state of Michigan, we all benefit from that. $1.8 billion in a 5-year period of just immigrant business owners. Did you know, one of the things that we hear, those Middle Eastern people, those Arab Americans, those, all the derogatory conversations or comments that we hear. Let me tell you, because one of the largest populations of Arab Americans is in the east side of the state, right? Dearborn. In a 4-county region around Detroit, 4 counties only, right? 4 counties only. Arab Americans influence and contribute to a $7.7 billion to their economy. They contribute $544 million in state taxes. These are statistics that we have, okay? And because of their financial and economic opportunity, contributions, they support over 140,000 jobs in that area. So here again, have you heard those statistics in our national conversations about individuals who come from the Middle East? Or have you only heard all the negatives about the people who come from the Middle East? Hispanics, Latinos in the state of Michigan paid $1.1 billion in federal taxes. $565 million in state and local taxes. That's dollars that come from a community of peoples that in our medias and in our conversations has also been portrayed in a very negative way. And yet, these are statistics that we know are factual, and you know, and gives us a picture about the benefits and that they bring to us, to every one of us. In our communities, in our states, we benefit from having these folks here. The purchasing power, which means their earnings minus their taxes, is their purchasing power, their buying power. In the Hispanic Latino Commission in the communities here in the state of Michigan, their combined buying power is $9.8 billion. That means they're spending their dollars here in the state of Michigan, dollars that supports the jobs for Americans, dollars that supports the opportunity for long-term American residents to benefit from all the social services that are made available to us. And also, in terms of the Hispanic Latino population, in terms of their contributions to our economy, besides those things, based on the 2007 data, unfortunately our data is really kind of outdated, but based on 2007 data, Hispanics, Latinos owned 10,770 businesses, generated $3.9 billion in sales and receipts, and employed 18,508 people. They're not what we sometimes portray Hispanics to be. These are factual statistics. And then if you look at this from the Asian American community, you will also recognize that the Asian American community here in the state of Michigan has a purchasing power of almost $12 billion, $11.8 billion. And Asian Americans have, their business statistics are that they, let me make sure I don't misspeak myself. Asian American owned businesses in 2007 had receipts of $7.7 billion. They employ 66,293 employees and had an accumulative buying power of $11.8 billion. What I'm sharing this with you is not to say that, you know, oh, we pat ourselves on the back as immigrants, but to say to you that many of the stories that you might be hearing about immigrants and refugees may not be the true stories about the contributions they bring. Now, this isn't to say that for us as immigrant communities that we not create a division with our African American community peoples. Because I will tell you that they contribute, I think their buying power is close to $6 billion in the state of Michigan. Some of the largest top 100 black-owned businesses in the country. Some of those African-American-owned businesses in the top 100 in the country are also located in Detroit. Now, the automotive industry certainly helps that. But again, what do we hear, or what do you hear about these demographics, about these individuals? So these immigrants and these refugees that we are wanting to welcome into the state of Michigan, what is factual is that immigrants are more than twice as likely to start a business than native-born. It's factual statistics. They are, and the immigrant businesses are 60% more likely to export, which is a key factor to economic growth. And if you think about, about the large companies in the United States today, 40% of the largest US companies were founded by immigrants or their children, including 7 of the 10 most valuable brands in the world. Here's the other part that we sometimes don't realize, is that we have in the state of Michigan some great institutions of higher learning. We have them here in our region. Grand Valley State University certainly is a very good institution. You've got Michigan State, University of Michigan, you've got Wayne State, you've got Western Michigan, you've got Central Michigan, you've got a lot of, and then you got those local colleges that we have around us. And here's an interesting statistic. We talk about or we hear a lot about the negatives, but one needs to realize that within the state of Michigan, we have almost 29,000 international students studying in our universities and colleges. They contribute $924 million to Michigan's economy. They're not takers, they are paying full rides. And it's an interesting story I heard from an administrator at the Michigan State University that I think he was making a humorous comment, but I think there's some truth to it. He says one of the biggest challenges that Michigan State University has at the end of every school year is how to get rid of all the Mercedes and the Audis that are parked in the drive in the streets that international students are leaving behind because they can't take it back with them. There are great benefits of our refugees and immigrants and our international students that they bring to the state of Michigan. So one of the things that our office is trying to do is to take a look at what I talk about the college students and university students is one of the gaps that we have in our state's economy as we are shifting from a manufacturer-based economy to a more knowledge-based economy. Not that manufacturing isn't important. I mean, it's still the largest, it's still big, and it's still very critically important to Michigan's economy. But we're seeing there is a greater demand for individuals with the talent that can fill the gaps in our knowledge-based economy. So you've heard the acronym STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, correct? So what we do know is that U.S. students have a tendency not to take that type of course training in our universities and colleges. And so what we also know is that out of these international students and of the immigrant groups and things like that, they are more likely to take STEM education. Now, the challenge for us as we're trying to fill these gaps is how do we retain that talent to stay in Michigan? Now, on the international student side, we have a visa issue, which is controlled by the federal government. So there's not really that much we can do, but I'll talk a little bit about how companies are doing it. But on the other side, we know for a fact that refugees and immigrants who are coming to the United States, who are work certified and have a legal presence in the United States, that many of them have a background and an educational experience and work experience from their home country in STEM field related jobs. So the challenge that we have in our Office for New Americans under Governor Snyder is saying, how do we make sure that we are able to utilize their talent and keep them here in the state of Michigan? We know that currently there are probably 47,000 individuals under that category of immigrants or / refugees who have that kind of ability and that kind of education and that kind of work experience. The challenge for us is how do we get to make sure that they are part of, that their talents being used in the proper economies. One thing we always say is we certainly don't want to be known as the state that has the most educated taxi cab drivers, because unfortunately many of them have to resort to that type of work. They are taxi cab drivers, they are wait staff in restaurants, they are doing things that really doesn't take advantage of their skills and talents. So we started a program called MITS, the Michigan International Talent Solution. And that is to try to identify those individuals with those kinds of talents and help them go through a process to help them understand what they can do and are able to do. And we'll help them through, the licensing and the certification process and, and then help them get connected to employers. And what's beautiful about this program is that it's a free service to employers. Right? The employers come to us and say, you know what, I've got these job openings, I can't find them in my traditional way of job fairs and those kinds of things. Can you help us? And so once these individuals have passed the vetting process for us in terms of making sure that they are going to be matched correctly with the employer, then we give those resumes and to the companies, and we encourage the person to apply at these companies. And it's been working very successfully. It's about 3 months old, but it's been working very successfully. What we need, is we need more of those kinds of skilled workers. Some of you in this audience know that there is a program called the H-1B visa, which is a program in which the government allows 85,000 H-1B visas for companies to be able to keep talented international workers in the United States to work for the company. Here's the problem. The last application cycle just finished in April, in the middle part of April. There were 236,000 applications for 85,000 slots. And the federal government saying we don't want to increase it. Sorry, but that's really stupid. Right? So these are individuals with skills that we're not going to send back to their home country to become our competitors. It doesn't cost the government anything except to print the visa for H-1B visa. And here's the thing. The 236,000 is just a small indicator of how critical situation we are in our economy. Because you see, these employers are not going to go through this process. The cost per application could cost up to $8,000 per application. And then to lose, it's like a lottery, right? I mean, the chance is probably maybe better if you just bought a lottery ticket and see if you can retire with that. But that's the problem. We have the opportunities and we have the talent, and we can bring in, these individuals to help us. And let me give you an example. What time is it? Okay. Let me give you just an example. In Detroit, you know all the struggles that Detroit had, right? In 2005, there were the companies located in the city of Detroit were unable to process 5,000 of those H-1B visas because the cap was gone, and once the cap is done, if you came after the cap was completed, your application was not even considered. if we didn't have a cap for the city of Detroit in 2005, we would have been able to create 15,000 more jobs in technology for people that could come to the city of Detroit. Within the next 2 to 3 years, we would have created another 40,000 jobs for US residents. Because you see, our data shows that for every STEM graduate, they create 2.6 new jobs for American citizens. So think about that. 236,000 applications, 85,000 is the limit. That's what, 150,000 that were going to be discarded because of the cap. And if the data is correct, that 2.6 jobs for Americans are going to create it, we just have lost, because of that, over 300,000 jobs. And yet, you don't hear that. You don't hear that in our political discussions. So what I'm saying to you is this information, this data is available, and I can give you many more data, but the time is running out. So let me just let me just end with this. Governor Snyder started this office because he understood that the immigrants and refugees in the past made Michigan great and made this country great. And he understood and believed that if we were able to return our focus on those demographics and those individuals alongside our other long-term residents in the state of Michigan, that we could help recover the economy within the state of Michigan. As you know, we went through this horrible time because of the auto industry and other factors that caused our economy to be hurting for some time. But he also understood this from another perspective. Certainly economy, certainly culture, knowing and working with and relating with and socializing with and enjoying the rich cultural heritage of many, many different groups is what makes our quality of life also good. But he saw the side of him. He said to me when we were talking about taking this position, he says, but I also understand that this is a humanitarian issue, and we've got to find a way to deal with these individuals, not because they're an economic statistic, but because they're human beings. And I want to suggest to you tonight, as I end this conversation with you, I want to suggest to you tonight that sometimes we need to rethink of how we label people. Because see, refugee is not a label of a human being. A refugee is a legal immigration status. That's all it is. It doesn't define you as a human being. Refugee is a label. So my suggestion, and I think this is why Governor Snyder named our office the Office for New Americans. Once you have gone through the vetting process, and once you are allowed to come into the United States, you are a new American. You're not a refugee anymore. And we ought to treat each other as new Americans and as Americans. And I think that's the important part that we need to get out of. But as we begin this discussion, and you know there's going to be a lot of discussions about immigration and refugees in the next, I don't know, when this lecture starts, November, whatever. Help people to understand the benefits and the contributions that these individuals can bring to our own personal lives. The richness that they bring to us, the quality of life that will be enhanced and raised because these are individuals who come with great assets for us. And if we can get to that point and begin that discussion, now Kentwood certainly is very well known for its diversity and its leadership is very important, to them as well. The mayor, I've spoken to the mayor many a times, and his commitment to this and welcoming, and I think that is part of where I'm asking you for your help today. I think the business community can fight and advocate for all the things that I talked about the benefits of the economy. But the most important part that every one of us can play, even if we're not a business owner, is for you and I to join together and create a welcoming community. And I will tell you, that is hard work. And that's what we need to do. We need to begin to look at ourselves, at each other as brothers and sisters, and people who have gifts and talents that enhances our lives, our quality of life. And in doing so, we must, we must be advocates, and we must stop the crazy conversations that we are hearing about what I call human beings. You know, my family fled, my parents fled Indonesia because of their children. And I will tell you that in my conversations with refugees today and immigrants today, they leave their home country for their children. So I would encourage you and challenge you to join me in that effort. Creating a welcoming community is going to be a very difficult task, because we are living in a society that allows these kind of conversations to go unchecked and unchallenged. And it's time for us to challenge that. So thank you so much. I think we have time for some questions, if you have questions. Yes, I'm sorry, that's what we use, right, Erica? Where's Erica? That's okay, good.
Right, great. Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing tonight. That was wonderful. And welcome back to the Council of West Michigan.
Yeah,
nice
thanks.
to see you. My question is this. Is our state unique in having someone in your role and having your office, or is this common right now across the country?
It is unique. Governor Snyder certainly was very visionary about this. When he established this office, there was I think only 4 other states that were beginning the same commitment to establishing this office. Now there's other states that are thinking about this. We've been in conversation. I think Pennsylvania is one of the recent ones that we've been in conversation with. Some cities are creating this office for their own city rather than on the state level as well.
So is part of your role then helping to mentor in those new centers across the country, or is your focus only in Michigan?
I don't know if I would call mentoring, because we're still trying to learn it ourselves. So.
Sure, yeah, okay.
But we are in conversation with other states.
Okay.
And I think that, for example, our program, our MITS program, is being looked at by other states now to see how they can use that model to integrate the talents that their immigrants and refugees communities can bring to their state's economy.
It's a great program. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, out of 1,000 questions I have, I'll pick one.
I don't know if I have any 1,000 answers. That's my problem.
Okay. Does the state of Michigan have a program for its own citizens that are graduating college to oversee and match up with employers if they are also not having success in obtaining jobs in their particular fields, similar to the program you were talking about with the international folks?
Yeah, Michigan certainly has that. I mean, our Michigan Economic Development Committee, whatever they call themselves, MEDC, they certainly have programs available. Michigan Works and all those things. Believe it or not, I mean, in spite of what we're talking about, there are still almost 100,000 jobs that are being unfilled in the state of Michigan. So it's just a matter of being able to match up those skill sets, right? I mean, and like I say, Governor Snyder is not saying that we're ignoring the U.S. College students. We want them, and we have had historically a lot of programs available to help these U.S.-born college students, graduates, to get connected to companies. The companies who are coming to us is saying, we've gone through this process. We have not been able to do that. We've not been able to fill that job. So can this program called MITS help us meet that need? So let me give you an example. In 2013, there was a job fair in the city of Detroit. There were 50 companies with 3,000 engineering jobs available. They were ready to hire them. They had 274 applications. So it's not like, oh, they're taking all of our jobs away. It's just the matching of skills is not, it has been difficult for a lot of companies. So, you know, we certainly are not saying, oh, hire those who just, the new Americans who just come here. We're saying, if you can't find those, here is another talent pool that's available to you, and you know, we're trying to help you vet through some of these applications before it gets to you. And what's interesting about that group that we're seeing, every one of them has to have a BA before they can apply for our program. Almost 50% of them have a master's degree or higher in that talent pool. So it's just a matter of connecting them, giving them awareness of what they need to do in order to qualify for these particular positions that's open in our economy.
I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about the process in between landing in Grand Rapids to becoming self-sufficient? We heard last week that refugees are given, you know, a limited amount of funds to get started, and obviously there's agencies like the West Michigan Refugee Center that are helping them figure out how to use thermostats and all these new things, but like educational assistance, learning to speak English, job skills, that type of thing. What happens to help get them to self-sufficiency?
You know what, there's probably other people in this room that could probably answer that better than I do. Let me just say what we try to do. So for example, we, under Governor Schneider's mandate, he's saying to us as agencies and departments, say, bring the people together, like Bethany Christian Services and Lutheran Social Services, I think they've got another name now, and others who are part of the resettlement agency process. And we brought them all together and we asked the question, what are the gaps? What is missing? We don't do it ourselves. We trust that work to be done through those particular resettlement agencies. So I'm really not good. Maybe Susan, if she's here, she could give you a better answer than I can. But you know, once it gets here to here, certainly there are some processes that's in place. Would you like to answer that, Susan? Well, someone's asked a question, and I don't want it to be leaving. Oh, sure, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
There we go. So in terms of what services are available, last week they talked about a lot of the services are provided through organizations like the Refugee Education Center, Bethany Christian Services, and Samaritas is their new name. The federal government has what they call targeted assistance grants that focus on specific areas that are identified as being needs and barriers to integration, such as the English, learning English. Sometimes they're focused on specific vulnerable populations like the elderly or young people, persons with chronic health needs. So a lot of that funding comes from the federal government through the State Office of Refugee Services to contract providers locally. Because of the way it works, sometimes the needs that are most emergent don't make their way up to the federal level very quickly. And so some of the things that you might look at and go, well, this seems to be a gap, the communication is in place to slowly get that up to the federal government so that they can start providing that need back into the communities long term. It just takes a while. So I think a lot of times what we look at is how do we right now, through volunteers and community resources, meet those needs while also educating government officials at the state and federal level that this is something that we're seeing as emergent. So does that help? Okay.
I think one person was standing up that wanted to come up to the microphone. That will probably have to be the last one. Yeah. Okay. Okay. But I'll be around afterwards if you have any additional questions. Go ahead, please.
I understand that one of the bigger problems for refugees coming into the Grand Rapids metropolitan area is to find housing, especially for families. It seems like some of the rentals available are either beyond the possibility for these people to pay, or there just aren't 3-bedroom accommodations for these people. What can we do about that?
From the state side, I know there's been conversations again when Governor Snyder asked our office to lead the discussion from, with other agencies. One of the agencies that's at the table is Michigan, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, and they're trying to address it. But you see, they can't control, what the rental fees are going to be, and it's a very difficult challenge that we have. And again, Bethany Christian Services, I know there's a representative here, but Bethany Christian Services and others are certainly aware of this challenge and trying to find ways to get them affordable housing, in West Michigan. And again, this is part of where the role that you and I can play, which is to be an advocate for that, right? I mean, I don't know if there are any elected officials in the audience. Okay. You are, sir?
Steve Redmond, County Social
Okay, good. And so I think elected officials can play a major role in this, in this effort, because, they can make policies, right? That could be helpful for that. So I think that's the kind of advocacy that I think we all can play. It's not hard for us. It may be uncomfortable, but it's not hard for us to come to a city commission meeting and say, we have this challenge in our community. What can we do as a community to address those challenges? So thank you for being here. And I know that Emily's here, who is intending to run for a commission seat. Hope others will do the same thing, because your voice can certainly be very beneficial in helping us address this really difficult and challenging problem. So thank you so much for your time. Shall we dance?
Yeah, I know, I'm so awkward right now. Thank you, Mr. Goei, for just a wonderful and thought-provoking conversation. One of the things that we appreciated at the World Affairs Council when you spoke the first time is just how fact-based your presentation was, and I'm so happy that you continued that trajectory this evening. A lot to think about as we move forward. Before we close tonight, I have a few announcements. Again, next week on Monday, May 2nd, for our final presentation in the series, we'll focus our attention on the international stage. With a presentation by Consul General Douglas George of Canada, who will discuss how Canadians are resettling Syrian refugees. Incidentally, they're settling about 25,000 Syrian refugees and plan to resettle more, so it should be quite interesting in contrast to what's happening in the U.S. That event will be here again at the Kentwood branch of the library, and it begins at 6:30 p.m. The World Affairs Council also has 2 upcoming registration deadlines, both on Thursday, April 28th. If you haven't gotten enough on the issue of refugees, we want to again let you know about a partnership with Spectrum Health. We'll be hosting a free webcast on global health and refugees taking place during the day of Monday, May 2nd. It's free to attend, and there's more information in the information table at the back of the room. So please check it out and be sure to register if you're interested earlier rather than later. Our deadline to sign up for World Quest is rapidly approaching. It is our almost famous international trivia competition. It's taking place on Thursday, May 19th. We are rapidly running out of tables for the event, and rapidly running out of seats for individuals. So if you're interested, again, speak with Ashley. She's really great at selling these events. I've actually never done World Quest yet, so I'm the newbie here, so she can tell you more about it. Now, for tonight, if you want more engagement, we have our Cultural Explorers Meetup hosted by Kathy Dopp. And Kathy, you asked the question. You'll be at Weiwei's Palace tonight, which is just a pretty fabulous local venue. It's right off of Division and 44th Street. So if you enjoy talking with people while you share food and drink, it's the place to go, and it's free to attend. You just need to pay for your own refreshments. That's it for me. So finally, let me introduce Heidi Nagel, who's our Manager of Communications at KDL, and she'll close this evening's program.
Thank you, Erica. So I've been in Michigan since 1985, and I still haven't adjusted to the climate, but so excuse my spring cold. Thank you so much for coming this evening. On behalf of Kent District Library, we are so astonishingly proud of this series. We are delighted to be able to bring people together to have a civil and fact-based and informative conversation about a controversial topic, and are so indebted to our partnership with World Affairs Council. This actually came about, I think, over a year ago. Kent District Library board member Craig Wilson is also a World Affairs Council board member, and he kind of brought us together and said, go and do something. And we floundered about for a little while and stumbled upon this topic, and clearly it's been phenomenally successful, and I just want to thank you all for being part of that dialogue. So very quickly, there is a handout of just some book recommendations. Of course, as a librarian, I have to recommend reading to you. And Kent District Library, we really believe that stories are where we discover our commonalities, as opposed to looking at the surface and only seeing the differences. So there are a few things here that we really recommend, and hope that you will find them to be pretty inspiring reads. We are in the second half of our first ever KDL Reads event, and our spring programming guide Kaleidoscope is in the back. We are welcoming award-winning author Jacqueline Woodson to the Comstock Park High School on May 26th. Jacqueline Woodson wrote the book Brown Girl Dreaming, which is the focal point for our KDL Reads events this spring. It is a phenomenally beautiful book about growing up as a young African American woman in the 60s, both with a background firmly rooted in the South and experiences in the North. And it's just an incredible tale, and we have been hosting conversations throughout Kent County around that book, and people of all ages and all backgrounds have truly loved and embraced it, and we are so excited to bring Jacqueline here to West Michigan. So please join us on May 26th at the Comstock Park branch. And again, thank you so much for coming this evening. We greatly appreciate it and hope to see you next week.